From the creators of Game of Thrones comes the three body problem. The YouTube algorithm the other day decided to throw this in my face, and I didn't know what it was, even though I probably should have, because I have a history with the three body problem. When I first saw the thumbnail and then subsequently watched the trailer, I was very confused because I didn't know this was going to be an adaptation of The Three Body Problem by Liu Cixin, a Chinese author who became quite famous because of this science fiction series of books, part of this trilogy called Remembrance of the Earth's Past. Published in 2008, and it won the Hugo Award in 2015, which is a big deal because he was the first Asian author to win Best Novel. It was a big deal that he won it because when you think of science fiction, you don't usually think of China or even any Asian country, anything in the East. This book has been validated by a lot of people in the West. Mark Zuckerberg, Barack Obama, even George R.R. Martin, author of Game of Thrones, has blogged about it. I don't know what that says. I don't know why Western validation is a thing, but I guess it is a thing. It is a thing. I don't want to spoil this story, but I want to talk about my history with the three body problem because it is actually it is probably the only Chinese book I've ever read in Chinese. And this was 8 years ago when I was studying Chinese, studying abroad in China. I had this one tutor that I really disliked. He was very intense in a program where you learn Chinese and everyone is a business major or in the liberal arts. The speaking discussions were over politics or the economy or finance. I was just not into that. And my tutor, he would try to start discussions on topics that I really had no opinion on. And he would kind of get impatient when I just had nothing to say, but I really sometimes just had nothing to say. One of the only good things that really came out of those one-on-one sessions was this book, because one day he's just like, I know you have to read a book for your other class. Have you decided what book you're doing? I hadn't decided at the time. He was like, have you heard of Three Body? It's just called Three Body in Chinese. So it sounds like some freaking murder mystery documentary or something. But no, it's a science fiction novel and it's named after the famous problem in orbital mechanics where the orbit of three bodies is unpredictable. The only reason he recommended this book was because I was the only science major in the program. Apparently, I wasn't into much else besides science. So he's like, well, this is science fiction, so you might enjoy it. The first book is really a story of humanity's first contact with an extraterrestrial life form. These aliens are called the Trisolarians, and they're called Trisolarians because they live on a planet that orbits 3 suns. And as we mentioned in the three body problem, the orbits of these 3 suns is very unpredictable, and so this causes their environment to be very unstable. Their planet is almost non-hospitable because sometimes when one of the suns is too close, it's too hot, and if it's too far, it's too cold. There's a lot of extreme weather conditions. They've evolved to sort of adapt to this, but they always live under the fear that one day maybe one of the suns will just crash into their planet and destroy everything. So they've always been on the lookout to inhabit another planet, and they've been sending out signals for a long time just to see if someone's gonna respond. So this lady named Ye Wenjie, living during the Cultural Revolution, a time when people were persecuted for being intellectuals. It was a very radical time, and she kind of lost hope in humanity because of that, and she decided to respond to this alien message. The Trisolarians, after they get the signal, they decide to come to Earth because now they know our location. And it's gonna take like 400 years or so for them to arrive. But in that time, they are also able to do some things to hinder humanity's technological development. Let's be honest, I don't remember too much of it. I read it in Chinese, and my Chinese at the time was not exactly the best. And this book is very heavy on like the scientific themes, and I struggled through it. I struggled the heck through that thing. It seems to be gaining popularity over the years, so I guess that's probably one of the reasons why Netflix is making this into a show. I actually would have never expected Netflix to adapt a story from mainland China. China has always been known to kind of lack soft power compared to, Korea and Japan and some other Asian countries. Every time you hear about China, you either hear about like traditional China back during the emperor or something related to martial arts or Chinese food. And even in modern day China, the cultural influence is from Hong Kong or Taiwan. It's never really about mainland China. Anything about mainland China is just like CCP, all of that we don't like over here in the West. The beginning of this story actually starts during the Cultural Revolution, which is a very tumultuous time in Chinese history. It's not really talked about a lot. It's not talked about in China. People don't like to bring it up. It was not a good time. I don't want to go into all the details, but sometimes I think of China during that time as like your body's immune system trying to fight off an invader, but then going on overdrive and like attacking your own good cells. This book has a very unique cultural lens. I don't know how they're going to show it in the show, in the Netflix adaptation. I hope they're able to portray it in a way that is nuanced, real, and authentic to maybe do what Godzilla Minus One did with post-World War II Japan. Like, that would be incredible. But I think that's setting the bar too high for Game of Thrones writers. I don't know if whitewashing is the right word to describe this. So most of the cast is like non-Chinese. They have like maybe 2 people. 10% of the cast is of Asian descent. I guess it's almost more like they're diversifying the cast because the main characters in the book are all Chinese until later on. I mean, this book starts in China. The subsequent books, The Dark Forest and Death's End, they kind of grow wider in scope in that it becomes international and then it becomes universal. It's actually one of the most interesting things about it. It starts kind of back in the day and then it moves hundreds of years, centuries into the future. It eventually unveils a conspiracy that is the most mind-blowing thing at the end, but I'm not going to spoil that, but I can understand why Netflix would want to take a more international or Western lens. Initially, my reaction was kind of like, what exactly are they doing to this story? 3-body problem, but why are we in the UK? The story is a very universal story. It gets very global and universal later on, so it's not really focused on China, but the reason that it was very unique was because it was telling a story from a culturally Chinese lens. And I really hope Netflix keeps that. I hope they don't just completely take that away. If they can make this story good, it'll be an interesting story. China has already made a Chinese drama on it, so I guess it makes sense that they're trying to look at it from a different angle because, first of all, Netflix is not even available in China. Like, China is not the target audience of this. I don't know who the audience of this show is going to be. I don't know who they're trying to target. Maybe they're targeting Game of Thrones fans again. I feel like they are. Nowadays, Game of Thrones fans are like first-class citizens. Everything is targeting you guys. Like, I'm a Game of Thrones fan, but I'm like confused a lot of the time. If they're targeting fans of the book, they're gonna have to tell the story well. And if they're targeting overseas Chinese outside of China, then it's like, well, maybe you should have casted more Chinese people. But if it's done poorly, then I don't think the cast really matters. I think it's fine that they're trying to do this from a more international perspective. But at the same time, I also think this was probably a really good opportunity for China's soft power to build bridges with the West. And I really hope Netflix doesn't screw that up. I do hope that this show ends up being good. Like, if they tell the story well, I don't think people will be complaining about it.